Francis Ngannou has some kind of problem with Alexander Volkov. I don't know what it is, but I wish he would let us in on this. But Francis has been going after Volkov publicly. Sign the you've turned me down twice, sign the contract. And I have a few thoughts on this because first off, Volkov just doesn't strike me as Mr. Turn Down Fights. Just by example, I got familiar with this guy when he was brought in to fight Stipe or Daniel Cormier. When they had their very first contest, Volkov was flown over from Russia, got onto a scale officially in front of everybody and paid, X amount of dollars just to do that. Had a separate agreement should either Stipe or Cormier pull out and he has to go in. The only point I'm trying to make, and Volkov had been around for a little while, I'm just sharing with you, he got under my radar. I didn't notice him till then. And I'm looking at this and going, okay, Francis is scary as hell. I understand that. If you tell me that somebody's scared of Francis, I'm probably going to have to listen to you. But to tell me a guy from Russia who was willing to fight Stipe or Cormier and didn't even know who, and whoever ends up walking out there and I'm going to have less than 22 hours to have that answer, just doesn't strike me as a guy that's scared. So when Francis started going after him, it just had my attention. And the first time I ever saw Volkov fight, he'd fought a lot of times. Don't correct me on this. The first time I sat down and got to watch him fight, it was his match with Derek Lewis. And frankly, Volkov kicked Lewis's ass. I mean, I saw the fight. That's when Lewis became a star. Don't you guys remember? Lewis comes back in the third round, stops this big, tall, lanky Russian. That was Volkov. Lewis grabs the microphone after he took his shorts off. Joe Rogan says, hey, by the way, why'd you take your shorts off? And Derek Lewis very calmly says, my balls was hot. I mean, you guys remember this? He became a star for doing that. He went from my balls are hot to fighting in the main event at Madison Square Garden for the World Heavyweight Championship. I mean, it was just one of these wonderful nights, but I also remember Volkov because I remember how well he looked and I remember how competitive he was and I remember how many minutes of that contest he was winning. So then Volkov's supposed to fight. He's had many fights in between. On my radar, then he's supposed to fight in the Moscow show. Opponent pulls out, boom, Greg Hardy steps in. And it just would seem to me a guy willing to fight at home with a last-minute replacement who, by the way, weighs the limit, is a pretty rough guy and used to be in the National Football League. I can't call a guy like that a coward based on anything I've seen so far, but Francis essentially did. Francis came out and said a couple of times, sign the contract, you've turned me down 2 times, you've turned me down 3 times. Francis even called for a date. He told him where he wanted to fight him and when. Then things got real interesting because Volkov said, okay, I'll do the fight, but not completely on your terms. Let's make it in March instead of January, and let's make it in France instead of Vegas. Now, the relevance before any of you think he was looking for some hometown advantage is how long Francis lived in France. So he's basically offering, you give me 2 more months, but I'll give you home court advantage. Bit of a wash. I get it. I see where Volkov's coming from. The part I don't know is where this heat came from. I've never really seen Francis mad. I mean, he strikes me as a guy who probably's lost his temper a time or two, but I've seen him more from the calm perspective. Even when he got thrown in that first fight with Stipe, he was pretty calm, and what a meteoric rise. Francis Ngannou and Darren Till, their rise to the top was fast. And when you do that to a guy, as cool as it may look as an outsider for the guy, particularly if you fall, it can be a hard way back up. And both of those guys, we're talking Francis right now, but I think you see the comparison, they pick themselves back up. That's what a real fighter does. Anybody can throw punches and kicks, come on. Fighter gets up when he's down. I think Francis shown that he was a real fighter, but I've never seen a mad Francis. And I am a little curious as to what's pissed him off. If you guys have the story, fill me in.